Supreme Court. The court ruled that segregation didn't violate the Constitution. Plessy versus Ferguson said black and white facilities could be separate but equal. In practice, facilities were rarely equal. And that was just one part of what made life so intolerable. Segregation policed black behavior, too. Curfews kept African Americans from leaving their homes or meeting in groups. They had to live in separate neighborhoods, hold specific jobs, and talk to whites with the utmost respect. It was a new form of social control to keep African Americans in their place. Try to fight it, and you risk jail time, injury, even death. The laws and the society they created are known as Jim Crow. Jim Crow was a character used by minstrels. White comedians would paint their faces black and impersonate African Americans. Their impressions ranged from savage brutes to helpless fools. Insulting images of grinning faces were used to sell products, while scarier depictions could be called on to rile up a mob. Black men in particular were seen as dangerous figures. The 1915 silent movie Birth of a Nation popularized this myth. Screenings were often followed by riots and attacks on innocent people. Membership in terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan exploded. The KKK used fear and paranoia to spread hatred of African Americans. The slightest misstep, like looking a white person in the eye, could get you lynched. That meant being tortured and killed, often by hanging. Black Southerners were never really safe and lived in constant fear.
Oh my God.
Eventually, millions of them left the South during the Great Migration. They saw a new life in the North as their only chance at a fair shake. They resettled in cities like Chicago, Detroit.
Okay, so I love the questions I'm seeing in the chat. So what is the sense of making it separate if it was going to be the same exact thing? It's a very complicated question to answer. What happens is we have different levels of our government, right? And when our radical Republicans leave, they stop keeping a close eye on the South. And what happens is the South starts taking advantage of those laws. So it kind of essentially went back to more of what the South kind of wanted, which was keeping the whites and blacks separate at this point. You know, there's nothing in the Constitution that says whites and blacks can't be separated at this point. So we have to kind of just mention that whites and blacks were not treated, they were treated separately, but it was clearly not equal. Jane, I can't believe yeah, I mean, it was a very typical thing at this time. If you wanted to portray a black person at this time, like a weird thing is many black people were not actors back in the 1800s. Okay, so if you wanted to go on a Broadway play or film a short movie, you needed a white person to dress up as black person, which is obviously extremely insensitive. All right, so it's a much different time, but part of why you learn history, ladies and gentlemen, is to make sure you recognize these times that have happened and, you know, kind of make sure that they never happen again, so to speak. Okay, so let's go to our assignment here. Now, our assignment is two particular things. You have a 2-page reading, okay, where we're going to go more into the Jim Crow laws. There'll be some of the things that we just focused on in the video, plus from your notes, okay? And then after you're done with the reading, I'm not going to do the reading with you. I think you guys could do it on your own. It's fairly straightforward. Okay?
So I have a question too.
Yeah, so now from the reading, you should be able to get all the questions from the reading. So if you're noticing here, you have 5 questions from the reading. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so go back to the text for the answer. And then you have your 2 analysis questions, okay? And you have started to see these a lot when I'm doing these. Okay, analysis questions, they're not from your reading, okay? Use from your prior knowledge, use from your notes to try and get the answer. So as per usual, you have about 15 or 16 minutes, plenty of time to try and get this done. And then this is due by the end of the night tonight. All right? And let me just say one last thing about the Jim Crow laws. This was a horrible time in our history, and it's going to be weird for me to say this. Obviously, slavery was worse, of course.
Yes,
but
this sucks.
Better. All right, there are.
And that is a whole lot of brandy beans.
Yes, it's a whole lot of not good stuff here. Okay? So like Miss S is saying, you have your ELA strategies. Make sure you're chunking it. Make sure you're reading the small parts. And use your ELA strategies to answer some of these questions. All right? So I'll be taking attendance. I'll also be muting myself. You guys stay mute unless you guys have a question as well. All right? Very good enthusiasm in the chat. I can tell you guys are very interested in this stuff, which is good because this is a very tough and deep topic.
Peniel, can I just interject for a second?
Yep.
All right. D6, please make sure at all times you are restating the question and answering it at grade 8 level writing. All right. Just answering is not an answer. So question number 1, what were the Jim Crow laws? The Jim Crow laws were blank, blank, blank. Why were the Jim Crow laws put into place? The Jim Crow laws were put into place because blank, blank, blank. All right, please remember to restate the question, answer it, and give exact details for support. Jason, you may not know, but not everybody knows, sweetheart. Okay. Yeah, Shanika, you have to restate. I know, it's a struggle for you 8th graders. That's why you're lucky you get multiple choice.
So why were the Jim Crow laws put in place?
So you
I
have
think
to
I know why.
You can go back to the reading for the answer. I'll tell you the exact paragraph where you could find it. All right, but after that, I can't really give you much more than that. You have to go back to the text to find it. Okay? So the correct answer was, it's still in the first paragraph, okay, of the.
Well, so they can separate black people and white people.
Pretty much. Okay, and they give the examples of where in the text. So Jane, I definitely want to mention segregation is really bad, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it's just as bad as slavery. I do think having some freedoms and not being forced to do. I mean, black people were still able to get paid. Was it a good thing? No. But the reality of the situation is, and this is kind of the crazy thing, both whites and blacks were actually okay with being separated, and they were okay with the segregation part. The issue was the black people were not treated well, okay? And they weren't treated as equally as white people, and obviously that upset a lot of black people at this time. But it wasn't like a lot of white people at this time wanted to come back into society and integrate with white people. They actually wanted to stay separated. That's why Martin Luther King later on in American history has a big movement towards stopping segregation and reunifying the people in the country, all right? And it's not necessarily something that was originally wanted by black people, but that would obviously change because you could tell these things aren't equal. Yeah, Shanika, yeah, exactly. They were not treated well. I mean, that is as clear as possible. And that's a huge stain on American history because, you know, black people were not treated well because of these types of laws. Okay, when a person's not treated well today, that's because someone's not treating someone well. Black people were not treated well back in American history because these were actually laws that were passed by the government. And that's a better, and that's a bad thing. And it's obviously not great, okay, compared to, you know, how we should be living today. But segregation and slavery are definitely a big difference, and segregation is not nearly as bad as slavery, at least, you know, my opinion. Would I like to be segregated? No. Would I like to be a slave? Of course no. But, you know, I think there is a difference between the two. I wouldn't necessarily say.
Well, I think segregation is worse because, you know, you're going to get hanged.
Well, listen, I guess we're all entitled to our opinions. I would definitely say that if you gave me a chance of being free and being segregated or being a slave and being mistreated and not having rights, I don't think I'd ever choose to be in slavery. So not that either side's a good opportunity, but I would definitely say that slavery in terms of actually being beaten and hurt and eventually not being paid for any of their work is pretty bad.
Well, I think segregation is still worse because
Well, yeah, hey, of
because
course,
I
it's
think
your opinion, yeah.
segregation is worse because you'll get hanged and you're gonna be tons of.
Oh, okay, I see. Because of the lynchings. Yeah, lynchings occurred, of course, during segregation, but they also occurred during slavery. It's just not something I guess we covered. But they would happen just as much while African Americans were slaves as much as they would at this point. But that's a good point. Jane, black people were treated worse than strangers back then, and they still are today. Listen, there's certain situations where any individual person, no matter who your race is or who your group is, will not be treated particularly well. I think the important thing to understand, though, is in our country now, there's no laws really stopping you know, promoting things like segregation or promoting the mistreatment of any particular group. And if they're going to be mistreated, like a black person's mistreated, it's going to be because of actions of people in the country as opposed to a government law that's stopping, you know, African Americans from succeeding. You know, is there racism? Of course, you know, but obviously not nearly as bad as it used to be, thank God. They are, but in a different way, but it's not only, yeah, it's all groups of people, but you could definitely say black people, because of the history of our country, have certainly been treated, you know, pretty bad. Would I say it's the same in 2020? No, of course not. Yeah, Shanika, absolutely right. It works both ways. The racism works in many different forms. It's obviously horrible, but the actual racism that took place back in American history was because of legitimate government laws that caused these problems. All right. We have 5 minutes left, ladies and gentlemen, so keep going with this. You guys are doing a great job.
Well, I'm afraid of lynching.
What'd you say about lynching?
Well, yes, you'll die.
Of course, there were these situations where lynchings would occur, but I want to make this clear, Sebastian. It's not like every single hour of every single day there'd be a black person lynched. That would not be the case. But of course, when it happened to be a major tragedy, it would happen every so often to kind of remind black people of what happens if they went against segregation. But it's not like it was something that would happen every day.
And plus, if you fight back against segregation, they'll be hanged. Then Dunzo.
Yeah, no, of course. If you get lynched, if someone gets lynched, they die. Yeah, it's being executed. It's no joke.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then they'll be done in rings.
Yeah,
They'll be executed.
absolutely.
You know, onion rings, where you be died in rings, onion rings. That's why. You'll be dead.
Sure. I think you made that very clear. And it's not a good situation, but let's not go so far right now with the lynching part. Let's just look at the actual segregation, because that was a majority of the people in our country were segregated. Very, very, very few amount of people were actually lynched.
Yeah.
Right? The segregation was the tough part.
Hey, Miss S. Miss S?
Yes, Sebastian, I'm here, sweetheart. What's up?
Anyways, I finished my ELA work.
Did you? That's a great thing. Thank you for mentioning that, because I wanted to let everybody know we have ELA office hours next period, 8th period. So,
For help?
yeah, for help. So your schedule actually, it says ELA office hours. So I urge every single one of you to rejoin ELAS, not ELAPS.
Well, if you need help?
ELAS. Yeah, if you need help. And I would love if you join too, Sebastian, so I can see what you did.